Speaker Pelosi, welcome back to our program.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Let me ask you first, before we get to your book, about current affairs. We've just had this terrible report about the Israeli strikes on Gaza and Lebanon. Now, as they continue their counteroffensives, we've seen an attack on UN peacekeepers in Lebanon, and we've seen over the weekend some pretty dire attacks on refugee camp, on various areas that dozens have been killed, including children. I just wonder your response to that, given America is the most important ally.
Well, the fact is that we just a few days ago observed a one-year anniversary of a terrible assault on Israel by Hamas, a terrorist group dedicated to the destruction of Israel. Sadly, since then, we've seen many casualties of non-combatants, children and families in Gaza, and now some elsewhere in the region. And it's just intolerable. We cannot... war has to be outlawed as a resolution of any conflict or disagreement. But right now, we have to live with the circumstances that we have. We've all been talking about a two-state solution for a long time for Israel and for the Palestinians. The current leader in Israel does not agree to that, even though for about 30 years, since like 93, we have been talking about that. I don't know if Netanyahu wants peace. I don't know if he's capable of peace. I don't know if he's afraid of peace. But he has gone off the course that we all thought we were in as we support Israel.
He actually came to the Congress not so long ago. What did you make of that invitation and the way he spoke against your party and your administration?
Well, it wasn't his first time to do that. He came before. The invitation was misrepresented. It wasn't bipartisan, but the speaker said it was, and so he showed up and spoke against President Obama, whose masterful, virtuoso initiative for the Iran nuclear agreement was remarkable. He came and spoke against our president and our Congress. It was terrible. It was disgraceful. This speech that he made recently, I thought, was the worst presentation ever made by a leader of a country invited to speak before the Congress. I was against the invitation, but I'm not the speaker anymore. And, of course, I did not attend, but I did observe what he had to say. It was most unfortunate. But, you know, we all support Israel. It is in our national interest, our security interest to do so, our values interest to do so over time. But right now, the leverage that we have given Netanyahu has been used in a way that is most destructive.
Would you say right now, and we speak in the context of an election that all foreign powers and leaders are watching very closely, not only yourselves in the United States, would you say right now America should be using its leverage? And if so, what is that leverage?
Well, our support for Israel has always been bipartisan. And we want it to continue to be so in the Congress, in the House, the Senate, the White House, as well as among the American people. But it does not give license to so many people dying, not combatants, as I said, in the war. So we have to, again, try to strive to bring it to a two-state solution. I emphasize the word solution because I've said that to Netanyahu. It's not just a two-state situation. It's a solution, one that really works out the security, the prosperity, the freedom for the Palestinian people, as well as the security of the Israelis.
And given that there's an election, are you concerned by the very, very difficult polling for Kamala Harris, particularly regarding Arab Americans, particularly in the swing state of Michigan?
Yeah. Well, it is something to be considered. When we talk about this subject, people forget. They forget a Muslim ban instituted by this president. One of the first things he did...
By President Donald Trump.
By Donald Trump, one of the first things he did in his presidency was to have a Muslim ban. Democrats flocked to their protection, and yet this is what Donald Trump did. And now, because of this situation, which again Joe Biden has been a friend of Israel, that's for sure, but he has also been a friend of the Palestinians. And even before October 7th, when we were meeting our September 30th deadline for the budget, I was going to the Republicans and asking for humanitarian assistance for refugees. They said, we'll give you that as long as it's not used for the Palestinians. So the fact that she would be paying a price is for policies that were very pro-Palestinian is really sad. But death is sad, and that is being reflected. I'm not sure it's all spontaneous. Some of it is spontaneous. It's grassroots. It's truly that. I think some of it is motivated for other reasons.
Let me talk about your book now, called The Art of Power. You have said in your book, I know Donald Trump's mental imbalance. I had seen it up close. His denial and then delays when the COVID pandemic struck. His penchant for repeatedly stomping out of meetings. His foul mouth. His pounding on tables. His temper tantrums. His disrespect for our nation's patriots. And his total separation from reality and actual events. You know, how did you deal with that? And do you think this country, your country, can survive another term?
Well, I've said it over and over again, one term our country is strong enough to withstand. But when you see what, he's even gotten worse since I wrote that. He's saying in this campaign that he will criminalize any comments that are criticizing his actions. He'll criminalize freedom of speech. He, of course, will have a ban on abortion, a national ban on abortion.
Even though he says he won't?
Well, if his lips are moving, he's not telling the truth. When you go to so many of the things that he is doing, what is a democracy? That's what's on the ballot. A democracy is free and fair elections, a peaceful transfer of power, independent judiciary. It's about having respect for our Constitution, which we take an oath to protect and defend. He says maybe we should terminate the Constitution. So I don't know that a country can withstand, its character can withstand another term of Donald Trump. But we don't agonize, we're organizers. We have made a decision to win this election, and it depends on the turnout. The polls are close, yes. We don't know how reliable they are, but let's assume that they are for the moment and just understand that we must own the ground, turn out the vote, have a message that is appealing and unifying, not dividing in our country, and, of course, the money, the 3 M's, mobilization message, and the money to get the job done. And that's coming in at the grassroots level.
And do you feel confident? You are one of the savviest and the most important vote gatherers and vote getters in recent, certainly in Democratic history. Do you feel confident that those 3 M's and the ground game and get out the vote is where you want it to be right now?
I think so, yes. When you say, is it where it is right now, it has to continue to be. One of the reasons I'm in London is to do the Americans Abroad, to make sure that people get their votes in. When we won in the House in 2018 to stop him after he won in 2016, many of the differences were made in these districts by the votes of Democrats abroad, or just people abroad, but we're appealing to the Democrats abroad. So we're in a good place. I'm very proud of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. They have a vision of our founders, which they share, the values of the American people, which are so important. She's strong. She's strong officially, policy, strategy, presentation, and the rest. She's politically astute. She wouldn't be the nominee if she were not. And so she can take us to victory as well as win at the House, the Senate, and state races as well.
They say Nancy Pelosi is who and what convinced President Biden that he had to reconsider, and as you famously put it, make the decision about whether he's going to run or not going to run. you know, you've been asked a lot about it, but what is your relationship now with him? You've always professed to be so fond of him, and obviously he's done incredible legislation with all of your help in Congress during his presidency and etc. He's been in Congress for so many decades.
Yes.
Do you talk to him since July?
I haven't spoken to him since July, but of course we've been out of session for a while, and I've been on the campaign trail constantly. I have great respect for the president. I think his legacy is a very substantial one for our country. It is our legacy, too. I did not want that to be lost. My concern was about winning the election. You make a decision to win, and then you have to make every decision in favor of winning. On that ground with the mobilization message, non-menacing, and the money to win, and who is the candidate. Now, my concerns were about the campaign, not about the candidate. He's fabulous. But the campaign, I thought, was not going in the right direction, and I expressed my concern about that. It was up to the president to make the decision whether he would continue to run. He made that decision.
Do you think you could have won with him as the candidate?
It's hard to believe, you know, it's hard to ask me a question because I don't understand how anybody could vote for Donald Trump, but they do, and so we have to be prepared. I do think there was a generational thing, though, that had to be recognized. The two of them, so old to be running for president.
You talk about Trump. I want to play what Trump actually said about democracy and about how it might work out. He said it to Fox News on Sunday, and he was talking about an enemy within. I don't know whether you caught it,
no,
probably, but anyway, here's a bit of it.
I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of election day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. It should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
He probably includes you in the radical left, and probably includes you as an enemy from within. National Guard, military.
What you have to understand about the former president is he's always projecting. When he talks about the enemy within, he's talking about himself and his supporters. And when he's talking about actions that may be taken, he's talking about what they have done, what they are doing right now, and what they may continue to do. So understand, when he says crooked Hillary, he knows he's crooked. When he says crazy Nancy, he knows he's crazy. When he says the enemy within, he's talking about himself.
Let me ask you, because it's very, very minute by minute and grippingly written, your memories and experience of January 6th, when they were actually looking for Nancy, they were coming after you. I want to ask you to read a paragraph that you write about, and the question really is, how scared were you at that time? I mean, your daughter was there, she was doing this film about you.
I wasn't afraid for myself, but I was afraid for the members and the staff and the press who were there to cover that. I was afraid for the people who keep the Capitol in order because they were being insulted. These people who came were defecating on the floor of the Capitol. They were grotesque. So they were the enemy within and continue to be. So for me, I have a lot of security. I was Speaker. I'm in succession, line of succession, so I have a lot of security. I wasn't concerned about. I was concerned for the Vice President. I knew what they were saying about him. I knew they were coming to put a bullet in my head. That's what they said. But I've been a target for a long time. He was a target that day, and I worried about him, and I spoke to him about that at that time.
The Vice President.
The Vice President Mike Pence. Yeah. But he did the right thing for our country. He is not supporting this person for president, the former president, and I'm happy to...
Yes, read that paragraph, because it's quite quite dramatic.
Because I was concerned about my colleagues. They did not have the security I had, even though they have the security. The lawmakers inside the chamber had truly harrowing experiences. Jamie Raskin, still on the House floor, had listened as fellow members called their spouses to tell them goodbye, as had the vice president's security detail. Jamie and other representatives had donned gas masks because the tear gas canisters were being fired in the hallways. The House chaplain said a prayer as members pulled out the plastic ventilator hoods outfitted with air filters that were discreetly hidden in pouches under their seats. Until that moment, many had no idea that the protected hoods were there. They had been added to the House chamber as part of the enhanced security precautions put in place after 9/11. This is in the House of Representatives.
And it's the first that we hear about those masks, first and foremost, and that members were calling their families to say goodbye.
Say goodbye. And what was really sad about it was that after all this happened, and Republican and Democratic members were in that chamber as well, after all this happened, and people said to me, you've got to do whatever you're going to do in an undisclosed location about approving the Electoral College vote. I said, no, we're going to the floor. We're showing the American people and the world that we have prevailed and that these people have not won. But when that happened, overwhelmingly, led by the Republican leaderships, they voted against, in the House, they voted against the certification of the Electoral College.
Even after this?
Even after they saw all of that.
What do you say to people? Because Trump, his supporters in his campaign would say, oh, people like yourself or whoever says the kind of things you're saying about him and warning about, you know, the authoritarianism, the threat to democracy, they say, quote unquote, Trump derangement syndrome. That everybody's just hysterical, things were great under his presidency, and there's no need to fear.
Well, it's a really sad thing, and as I said, don't ask me why anybody would vote for him, but some people are just very anti-woman, anti-newcomer, anti-LGBTQ, anti-diversity and the rest, and will never get their vote. And then very rich people, billionaires, they don't want to pay taxes, they don't want any regulation of clean air, clean water, any of that. They just wanted not to pay taxes, and some of them don't pay any, and some do not pay their fair share. So they fund this. In between, there are people whose views are of great concern to our country. They're concerned about innovation. What does this mean for my family and for me and for my family in terms of jobs? They're concerned about globalization. There was a factory down the road, and now it's gone. And those are legitimate concerns, which Joe Biden and Kamala Harris addressed as we did in the Congress, in our bills, in the rescue package, in the infrastructure bill, in the CHIPS and Science bill, in the PACT Act, in the IRA.
Child poverty.
All of it. Well, they don't care so much about child poverty, even though many of them benefit from it, benefit from our investments in child poverty. But I would say that no. One of the things that held up the budget this year was Republicans were reluctant to fund food, nutrition for women, infant, and children who needed food. So I wouldn't say that they are too concerned about child poverty.
And finally, I want to ask you about your own family. A couple of years ago, you again were a target, but they got your husband at your house in San Francisco, and they violently, this guy violently attacked your husband with a hammer. And it has been a long process of rehabilitation. How is he doing? How were you able to talk to him about it? How's your daughters processed it?
Well, thank you for asking, and I know he'll be comforted to know that you cared. It was 2 years. It's the end of October is when this happened, right before the election 2 years ago. And where is Nancy? Where is Nancy was the same thing that was said in the Capitol by the same crowd, this guy, that he violated the sanctity of our home, that he violently attacked my husband looking for me. It was a horrible experience for anyone to have. But what's really doubly sad was when, maybe even more so, was when this happened, when we didn't even know if he would live. The former president, his son, the governor of Virginia, Elon Musk, people like that thought it was really funny. They were making jokes in the social media. Oh, it was just a very funny thing. From a standpoint of physical violence, that's one thing to repair from. Trauma is another thing, whether it was our volunteers, our staff in the White House, in the Capitol on January 6th, or my children and grandchildren and our family, the trauma of our father, our pop, being attacked, and they thought it was really funny. Physical violence and the trauma that goes with it is something we must remove from our politics, including, sadly, the assassination attempts on the president, which we all condemned, as opposed to what they did when I had the attack on my family. So he's coming along. It'll take a while, but we're glad he's with us, because he was a centimeter away from not being with us because of this person who was following up on my comments about the other side.
You have kept going in terms of kept running for re-election.
Yeah.
And several times you've said, and I remember you saying it to me once a long time ago, as long as he's there, I'm here. So you were talking about Trump. Do you still feel that? Are you going to keep going? I know you're running in this election.
Right now, we have to just win the election. We don't agonize, we organize, put one good day in front of another, no wasted time, no underutilized resources, and no regrets the day after the election that we could have done something better or more, because we do have a plan. But this is a different election. It's not John McCain. It's not Mitt Romney. It's not George Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush. It's not Bob Dole. They were all patriotic Americans, and whatever the outcome is, the outcome. This is somebody very seriously dangerous to our democracy, to our personal freedoms, which are part of our democracy, and to our reputation in the world. So there was no way, making a decision to stay was to make a decision to make sure he never steps foot in the White House again. In any event, time will tell, and whatever it is, we will accept the results of the election. That's something they won't even say. They still haven't accepted the results of the last election.
Speaker Pelosi, thank you very much.